Okay, fine. We'll do it. We'll address the Zach Werenski stuff. The rumors, the smoke, the meeting next week. We're going to discuss all of it and how worried people should actually be. That's coming up on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. We have to talk about the Werenski stuff. Finally, I know I literally yesterday was like, I'm not going to address it. I'm not going to address it. It's all smoke and no fire. And now I am being forced to address it because every insider from here to Alberta is losing their minds about it, and I'm mad about it. No, I'm frustrated for a lot of reasons. I want to talk about what's actually going on, who said what. I want to talk about the meeting next week. I have some speculation about that, which is potentially baseless. I want to talk about worst case scenario as well of, let's rip the Band-Aid off. If there is a trade, do you do it now? Do you try and push it down the road and sell him on, this season we're going to make playoffs. This season we're going to make progress. Will you stay this season? And we'll talk again next summer. Zach Werenski still has 2 years left on his deal. So that's, a potential option, but is that the best option, right? If he wants out, is it best to get rid of him now before things get worse? I don't know, but we'll talk about all of that. I want to first of all talk about the story, the arc of this story, right? Because it really feels like nothing has happened, and yet things just keep being said, right? So it started, I feel like a couple of weeks ago, maybe, of Pierre LeBrun being like, I wonder if Werenski's going to ask for a trade, and then the organization was like, no, he hasn't asked for a trade. No one has said anything about Werenski asking for a trade. And then LeBrun ran on this for 2 to 3 days of being like, here's speculation on Werenski. He hasn't asked for a trade, but here's some speculation on Werenski. That got picked up by Frank Seravalli, who decided that they should trade Werenski and Marchenko because he doesn't think the Blue Jackets are good, so they should just rebuild. Which, I mean, I don't listen to Frank Seravalli. You should also not listen to Frank Seravalli, right? He was like, I've heard Marchenko's name coming up in trade. That means that he's available and he's being shopped. And that's not what it means, Frank. That simply is not what it means at all. Being mentioned in trade talks is very different than being shopped, because one of those is Don Waddell calling about a player and being told, yes, but we want Marchenko in return. And then the other one is Don Waddell calling someone saying, hey, I would like to trade Kirill Marchenko, right? Those are two completely different conversations. It's not even apples and oranges. It's like apples and candy bars, or apples and puppies, two completely different things. But back to the Werenski thing, again, as far as I can tell, there's still no inclination in any way, shape, or form that Zach Werenski is going to ask for a trade, or has asked for a trade, or wants out of Columbus. I will say this. Zach Werenski has been, over the past year or so, very consistent in his messaging, right? Of he enjoys winning. He misses playing meaningful hockey with the Blue Jackets. I think the Olympics reminded him of that. The gold medal at the World Championships reminded him of that, right? And that he said, I want to win. I love it in Columbus, and also I want to win. And people are treating this like it's all coming out of the woodwork now. It's all brand new, this brand new information. And it probably is for the people that pay attention to Columbus 3 times a year. But he's been incredibly consistent in his messaging of, I love being in Columbus. I love being a Columbus Blue Jacket. He just, he has a stupid, giant, expensive house here. He just had a baby, or his wife just had a baby. He is, as of right now, committed to Columbus. Will that change in the future? Potentially. I'm not going to say, yeah, there's nothing to worry about. He's definitely going to sign an extension down the road. But people are treating it like he's got one foot out the door as we speak. And I simply just, I don't think that's true, right? the closest thing we have to any kind of like speculation or like any kind of real actual smoke is this meeting that's happening next week, which we'll talk about in a second here. That was reported by Elliot Friedman. According to Aaron Portsline, it was announced by Don Waddell, who was meeting with the media at the draft in Buffalo. Everyone's in Buffalo at the minute for the draft on Friday night. And Waddell spoke to a couple of reporters there, which I assume means that he texted Friedman and said, hey, this is happening. Can you put this out there so people stop just saying random stuff? And again, we'll talk about the meeting in a little bit more detail. But like that's the only substantive thing that they have. And I'm still not convinced it's anything, right? Like, it's definitely something. It is one thing, which is one more thing more than Pierre LeBrun had when he started this whole media storm. And again, there's been a lot of conversation of teams around the league are expecting Werenski to ask for a trade and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, cool. What do these teams know? Who have these teams been talking to? Or is this, as I suspect, just a bunch of teams trying to manifest this and a bunch of teams being like, you know who we would love to have on our team? Zach Werenski, right? I have been enjoying, I will say, out of all of this, the truly hilarious trades that have come out in terms of teams that are like, yeah, we'll take Werenski. Someone was like, we'll do Matthew Nice for Werenski straight up, but I'm not happy about that from a Leaf fan. I'm like, okay, well, I'll take Austin Matthews for Ivan Provorov straight up. Like, what are we doing here? A ton of very, very funny trade requests. The Bruins apparently are willing to trade a bunch of like AHL players at a second round pick. Like, okay, sure, fine. Very, very funny. That's the only funny thing about it, right? Mostly I'm frustrated that this is happening. Again, I talked about this last week, right? And I can't believe it was about this. It was about the Mike Babcock thing specifically, actually, which is this team can't seem to not have an off season filled with like drama, right? And the Babcock thing happened and it was over and it was all very much not a nothing burger. I don't want to say it was a nothing burger because I don't think it was. I think the league has decided it's a nothing burger and therefore the rest of us are going to get gaslit about that. But like now all of this has come out and now the fandom is going to be on edge for basically until news of this, like what happens in this meeting that comes out, right? So I guess let's talk about that meeting. Let's talk about what it means. Let's talk about some speculation on the meeting, stuff like that. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I got to tell you about Kalshi. The World Cup is here. It is the most electric time in soccer. And on Kalshi, you can trade in every single match all the way up to the championship game. Today, there's Switzerland versus Canada, which people are, I'm sure, going to be really, really excited about up in Canada. And right now, Switzerland is trading at only a 40% probability to beat Canada, which does mean that a $100 trade is going to pay out $239 if they win. If you would like to go for the underdog, that is a great, great option. You can also trade on Canada to win. They've got a 60% chance to win, so you will win more, you'll win slightly less, but you are much more likely to win. As the World Cup heats up as well, those numbers are going to move in real time. So you can buy in or out anytime you like. And on Kalshi, you are going to trade against peers in a live market. There's no house, right? As the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. So for a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade 10. KALSHI, Kalshi, trade on anything. I've also got to tell you about Odoo. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. And that's where Odoo comes in. It's an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success just isn't about talent, or isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working towards the same goal, and that's true in sports just like it is in business. Look at the Carolina Hurricanes. Every person in that organization is on the same page, and that's how they ended up winning the Stanley Cup. It wasn't just one great player or coach, it was a coordinated effort across the entire organization. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/locked on. That's ODOO.com/locked on. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Thanks for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Let's talk about this meeting that has mysteriously appeared on the schedule in the last 24 hours, because I don't think that's true, right? Don Waddell announced that he and Werenski are sitting down to discuss his future with the team after the draft, right? After the draft when? We're not sure. The draft is on Friday and Saturday of this week, so the earliest this meeting could happen is probably Monday, right? I don't know what they're going to talk about. I would be very, very surprised if this is a meeting that they've set up now. For a couple of reasons. One is that I don't think it makes sense to wait until after the draft. I get that they maybe want to do it in person and Don Waddell is already in Buffalo, but I don't think it makes sense. Second reason I don't think it makes sense is because if this conversation comes to a head and Zach Werenski's like, no, I don't think I do want to stay in Columbus long term, actually, then the draft is the place to get assets for that, right? And good assets as well. Trading for a first round pick right now, you know what you're getting, right? You know you're going to get second overall or fifth overall or whatever, right? Trading with, for example, the Sharks and saying we'll have a first round pick next year, if they get Werenski as part of that first round pick package, then they are going to be much, much better than second overall. And I know that they won the draft lottery and jumped up a bunch of places from, I think they were 9th originally. But those picks are immediately much less valuable just after the draft because you don't know what that pick is going to be. Teams could be good, teams could be bad. Right? Like when the Blackhawks traded for Florida's first round pick when they got in that Seth Jones trade last trade deadline or the trade deadline before last. No one was expecting that pick to be 9th overall, right? Everyone was like, yeah, that pick's probably going to be like 25th or whatever, right? It ended up being 9th overall. Obviously, it was top 10 protected, so nothing ended up happening to it, etc. But similarly, the Toronto pick that just got traded was only top 5 protected. Everyone was like, yeah, that's fine. The Leafs will probably make the playoffs. So that's going to be like probably an 18 to 24-ish pick. And it ended up being 6th overall that turned into 1st overall, right? So no one knows what pick is going to be. Having that meeting before the draft would make a lot more sense. I think this meeting has been on the books for a while. I don't know if it's someone speculated today in my mentions that it could just be the off-season one-on-ones, right? That they're starting with Werenski. We don't know. I wonder if this is going to be a conversation about, do you want the captaincy? Boone Jenner is moving on. Captaincy's vacant. We want it to be you. It also could just be that they were going to have a chat and they've decided to, again, Don Waddell has decided to tell the media this. And Don Waddell, the Blue Jackets organization has been very unleaky since Jarmo Kekalainen left. And again, we've talked about that, about whether Jarmo was the leak or whether it was someone in his organization that is no longer with the team was a leak or whatever. Not a lot of stuff comes out about the Blue Jackets now that Don Waddell's in charge. So he's telling them this on purpose, which I assume my guess is that they're just saying this to stop some speculation for at least a couple of days, right? The best case scenario is that this meeting happens and it comes out and they're like, yep, Zach's committed long-term and we're going to make him the captain and there's nothing to worry about, right? Presumably what will then happen is we will then do an entire year of, well, did he really mean it? Is he going to leave anyway? Blah, 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 until Columbus either makes the playoffs or doesn't make the playoffs, right? That conversation could change based on what Don Waddell does in the next 6 days or whatever it is. Word on the street is they are extremely aggressive, looking for player upgrades. Again, my heart is set on Jason Robertson. I don't think a Jake DeBrusk trade moves the needle enough, especially if you're acquiring assets to try and convince Zach Werenski to stay, right? Because that's another thing as well and people have talked about this, people have speculated on this, and I've talked about this a little bit as well, is if you think that Werenski's got 1 foot out the door, or if Werenski thinks he's got 1 foot out of the door, I'm convinced that Charlie Coyle is still in Columbus, at least partially because Zach Werenski wants him to stay. Zach Werenski said this season, he was like, Charlie Coyle is one of my favorite teammates I've ever played with. I love him. The whole team loves him. If you had a player that you thought was maybe thinking about jumping ship, wouldn't you keep a teammate that he loves around, right? It doesn't make sense if you think you're losing Werenski. Because here's the thing, is if the Blue Jackets lose Werenski, which we're not going to talk about that yet. We'll talk about that in a second as the worst case scenario. Like, if they lose Werenski, what do they have? That's a team that is careening for a rebuild. Except can they go for a rebuild? Because they've got all of these over 30 players locked up to long-term contracts with no move clauses. Like, you're not going to be able to tear it down properly, maybe ever, right? You're just gonna have to kind of limp along and hope that you can fill the gap that Werenski leaves, which is basically impossible because there's maybe 4 or 5 defensemen that can replace Werenski 1-for-1, right? So that's a whole other problem. But like, if you're Werenski and you're pushing for a player to stay, you're pushing for a coach to stay as well. Like, why if the Blue Jackets think that they might be going into a rebuild and they think they're going to be bad this season, why do you keep Rick Bowness around? You know, if you're Charlie Coyle and you think that there's any kind of inclination that Werenski might be jumping ship, why do you stick around? Because this team, straight up, without Werenski, not a playoff team. They just aren't, right? Why would you, as Charlie Coyle, pay that? Like, stick around? And people are like, well, it's because he got a long-term contract for a lot of money. He was going to get that kind of money on the open market. That's why they paid that much, right? If they'd offered, if he was going to get 4 times 4 on the open market, then the Blue Jackets wouldn't have had to pay 6 times 6 to make him stay, right? They paid him that much because they want him to stay and because he was going to get that much on the open market. Especially you look at how insane the movement has been over the past 24 hours. Like, people are willing to overpay massively for people. He was the best center on the market by a lot. That's changed a little bit with guys like Larkin being made available, but that's not a UFA thing. That's a trade thing, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me that in the last, month, 2 weeks, Zach Werenski has completely upended his decision to stay in Columbus, right? And there was I don't remember if it was in The Athletic. I think it was an Athletic article by Portsline that basically talks about, like, Waddell met with Werenski like the morning before the Norris got handed out. And, they chatted and everything was great. And Waddell has spoken to Werenski's agent as well, Judd Moldover, I believe his name is. And Moldover has basically said, yeah, we don't know where the noise is coming from. Don Waddell thinks that Zach Werenski wants to be part of the answer in Columbus, right? And, like, here's the thing is, I don't begrudge him wanting to go to a winner. He has put a lot of time into a team that has not rewarded him with very much, right? He's won a lot of individual stuff. He's won the Olympic gold medal. He's won the World Championships gold medal. His last playoff game was in 2020, right? Like, I wouldn't blame him, but I don't get the indication that he's got one foot out the door. I think people have just gotten spooked by, first, the Quinn Hughes thing, the Larkin trade request, Brady Tkachuk getting traded, Connor Hellebuck wants to be out of Winnipeg. Like, people are just obviously lumping Zach Werenski in with all of that. But I'm not going to sit here and say that there's no smoke. There is smoke. I haven't seen anything resembling fire yet, but there is some smoke. So let's talk about what happens if this meeting next week is Zach Werenski saying, actually, no, I don't think I want to be in Columbus long term. Let's figure out a solution to that. So we'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about HIMS. ED is way more common than most guys think, and millions of men deal with it at some point. It offers a simple, convenient way to take care of your health by connecting you with licensed healthcare providers online and giving you access to personalized treatment options from the comfort of your own home. There's no awkward appointments, no pharmacy lines, just a straightforward process designed to make getting care easier. Taking care of yourself, it shouldn't feel complicated, right? And HIMS makes the process private and easy to navigate. It's healthcare built around your schedule and your comfort. When something is already uncomfortable to talk about, the last thing you want is a super complicated process, right? Having the ability to start online from home makes taking that first step feel much more manageable. So To get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/lockedonnhl. That's hims.com/lockedonnhl for your free online visit. hims.com/lockedonnhl. Prescription required. See website for details and important safety information. Sildenafil is the generic version of Viagra. Viagra is a registered trademark of Viatris, especially LLC. Hims is not affiliated with or endorsed by Viatris. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's finish off by doing some doom and gloom stuff, right? Worst case scenario, Werenski wants out. He wants out this offseason. He wants to be gone. He wants to be on a new team by October. This is kind of the worst case scenario, right? There's some other scenarios that could happen, which is we don't want to talk extension at this time, which is fine. And I think a lot of people have decided that if Zach Werenski isn't 100% committed to the Blue Jackets right now immediately, then you've got to get rid of him while the going's good. His value is never going to be higher. He's just coming off of the Norris. Apparently, teams are willing to pay insane things for defensemen right now. Bowen Byram got traded for the 4th overall pick and stuff yesterday, and they threw in a cap dump Chicago's way. By all accounts, San Jose was looking at spending the 9th overall pick and the 27th overall pick on Byram as well. What would San Jose give you for Werenski, who is much, much better than Bowen Byram and is under team control for another 2 years, right? But if you're going to move him, but again, and that comes down to the best time to move him would be before the draft. After the draft, the value, not the value, but after the draft, the return you're going to get if you want futures is going to drop massively, right? What I was talking about yesterday, as soon as you make that pick, the value drops. You've driven the car off the lot as soon as you make that draft pick, right? Teams are much more interested in 3rd overall than they are in Caleb Malhotra, right? For example, no disrespect to Caleb Malhotra. I don't think this is the case. But if you do move him now, again, if you move him now, you got to move him now. You can't move him next week. Unless you are going to get players, like current roster pieces and whatnot back in return. I was trying to spitball how a trade with Dallas would work. Word on the street is that Dylan Larkin wants to go to Dallas. I wonder if that could be enticing for Werenski. He wants to go to a winner. Dallas is there. I wonder if there's something around like Werenski plus stuff for Jason Robertson and Thomas Harley. And I don't know who the stuff is. Like, would I do Werenski and Marchenko for Robertson and Harley straight up? And the answer, I think is, I don't think so, but I could be convinced if you do some like pick swapping potentially to make that work. But like that's the kind of thing. If you want to do that kind of trade, and don't at me about how that's a terrible trade, because it literally was just something that I was spitballing earlier today, and I haven't put a ton of thought into it. I was like, well, if Dallas is an option, how do you make the money work, and how do you they can't afford just bringing on Werenski, so they'd have to move money back the other way. Blue Jackets would get Thomas Harley, who had a down season this year, but is still a very, very good young defenseman under team control for less than what Werenski will cost in a couple of seasons. And then obviously, you bring in your difference maker up front as well. And that's the only kind of way that I can think of that doesn't absolutely cripple this team. Because if you trade Werenski for futures, that's a rebuild. That's 3 to 5 more years of mediocrity, right? And then you're going to get more players wanting out because they didn't sign up for a rebuild, right? So that's the worst case scenario. The other option, which might be worse, is that Werenski says, I'm not interested in talking about an extension right now. We'll talk next summer. In which case, you spend the entire season with it hanging over you. And then next summer you get to it. And if the Blue Jackets make the playoffs and do something in the playoffs, then great. If the Blue Jackets miss the playoffs again, there's no guarantee that Werenski has a Norris caliber season next season. His value drops. Teams know that he wants out. And with a year left on his deal, you're going to get less because that's essentially a pending UFA, right? And they're like, well, if you don't want to pay what we're offering right now, then we'll just wait 8 months or, however long it takes for him to walk in free agency. There's no way that Werenski is walking as a free agent, right? If they have to trade him because he wants out, then they'll do that. And I still don't think any of this is him asking for a trade. I think this is him saying, I'm not interested in extending right now. You know, Blue Jackets have some time here. Time is on their side. But the question becomes, if he says, right, I'm not interested in extending right now, do they do what Ottawa did with Brady Tkachuk and say, okay, well, if you don't want to extend here, then we'll just move you now. Quinn Hughes as well, an example of this, saying I'm not extending when my contract's due. They're like, right, well, we'll move you now. Difference here is I feel like those two not trade requests, but although depending on who you believe, Brady Tkachuk asked for a trade. Well, depending on who you believe, Brady Tkachuk asked for a trade after the playoff series that happened with Carolina, and also has spent the past 4 years telling all of his teammates that he's got no interest in re-upping in Ottawa and he can't wait for this contract to be over so he can get out. So like I don't think the Brady Tkachuk thing is comparable in any kind of way, because who knows what's going on there. The Quinn Hughes thing they kept remarkably under wrap right up until he was traded, right? Like there was some noise about, oh, is he going to be traded? Is he not going to be traded? Is he going to want to re-up in Vancouver? And then I feel like 2 weeks later they were like, yep, he's in Minnesota now, which was an organization that no one was expecting and a time that no one was expecting, right? They're not going to be able to do that with Werenski. There's too much noise now. So the value is going to drop. So I don't know. I don't think there's anything here. I really genuinely don't. And maybe that's me coping. Maybe that's me being too optimistic. We'll see what happens in this meeting. You have to think that, and again, Don Waddell is pushing hard to do something in the next few days. We don't know what that something is. They are, according to, I think, was it Mark Scheig, I think, saw a tweet about this. The Blue Jackets are amongst the most active teams in the NHL right now in trying to do something. And that something is trying to add an impact player, a top six winger, a scoring forward, right? Whether that's Jason Robertson, whether that's Matthew Nyes, whether that's Matt Barzal's name keeps coming up in like idle speculation. And I don't think that's likely, but I would like to see it. Jake DeBrusk is not a needle mover. He is a fine addition, a fine middle six addition. I don't know that he's the kind of impact wow move that they need to prove to Werenski that they're serious. This team might be a playoff team with Jake DeBrusk on it. They are almost certainly a playoff team with Jason Robertson on it, right? That's the difference here. So we'll see what happens this week, whether they make the pick at the draft, whether they trade it, whether they make this big, huge move. We'll see when they meet with Werenski as well, because they said after the draft. The draft is Friday and Saturday this week. Presumably Sunday they'll be traveling home from Buffalo, which doesn't take too long, but still counts as a travel day. Free agency is on Wednesday. So do they meet Monday or Tuesday? Do they meet after free agency is opened up? I don't know. A lot of moving parts here, but I'm not going to be worried until I think there's reason to be worried. And like, is there reason to be worried? I don't know. I don't think so yet. Aaron Portzline did an article today that basically was like, everyone calm down just a little bit. Yes, this is all happening. It could be pivotal. It could be huge. I'm going to pull the article up real quick just to read exactly what he said, because I think he was very, very calm about the whole thing. Here we go. What I'm hearing about Blue Jackets as the off season turns chaotic. So Aaron Portzline, there was some updates about a bunch of things, like Marchment is likely heading to free agency. Boone Jenner is probably heading to free agency. They're trying to move on from Elvis. Kent Johnson is Kent Johnson is both available and not available. He's a real like Schrodinger's winger at the minute. But let me pull up the Werenski thing. You've read the growing speculation about Werenski's future in Columbus. On Tuesday, Waddell told reporters at the NHL Board of Governors meetings in New York that he planned to meet with Werenski and his agent in the near future to discuss Werenski's future in Columbus. That sounds ominous, especially given all that's played over the league in recent months. Werenski turns 29 next month, coming off his first Norris Trophy win as the NHL's top defenseman. Is signed through 27-28. They can't extend him until July 1st, 2027. But if he makes it clear that he won't be re-signing, the earlier Waddell gets that information, as hard as it would be to swallow, the better. There's no way they could let a player of Werenski's value play out his contract in Columbus and walk to free agency in 2028. Actually, it's a little surprising if the meeting doesn't take place before the draft, as scores of players are expected to be traded before now and the end of the weekend, thus diminishing this summer's trade market. There are no guarantees that this will end with a trade of Werenski, at least not right away. For one, we don't know what Werenski and agent Judd Moldova are going to say to Waddell when they meet. He has a full no-move clause, and his wife just had a baby. The couple's first. Maybe now isn't the time to move. And even if Werenski does say he won't extend, there's a chance Waddell could punt such a difficult trade to next summer or perhaps next season's trade deadline if the Blue Jackets aren't in the mix. Nothing there to me says that anything is imminent, right? I think Portsline is very matter-of-fact about it, of if it's happening, it's happening, but there's nothing in there. And again, I have my issues with some of Portsline's reporting. He is the most connected Blue Jackets media member, right? He is the most connected person. The insiders love to be insiders, but my guess is if they know something, Portsline will know it either at the same time or first, right? So unless he starts reporting on things, I'm just kind of happy to let the insiders and the national media do their thing and talk. Get your clicks. You know? You're doing a great job, buddy. I don't know if that was patronizing enough. Maybe I should have been more patronizing. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not super worried yet. I am worried, but that's just because I worry about a lot of things. You know, I'm in a constant state of worry about this team being better. But I don't think this time next week, Werenski is still going to be a Blue Jacket. Almost certainly, right? And we'll see what happens at the draft. We'll see what happens with this big move that Columbus is trying to make, right? A lot can change between now and Monday, which is when I assume the meeting will be, Monday or Tuesday of next week. And also, again, the meeting could be nothing. I cannot stress enough that the meeting could be nothing. This could have been on the books for, hey, let's have a check-in for weeks. Right? Discussing his future in Columbus is so vague. Is this, let's discuss the future in terms of, hey, is there any smoke to this fire? It could be, do we want to make a statement? Do we want to say, no, Zach Werenski's not going anywhere? Is this, we want to give Zach Werenski the captaincy? Is this checking in on how he feels about the temperature of the organization, right? Is this, hey, we're planning on making a move, so we'll meet with Werenski afterwards to see how he feels in terms of the direction of this team. Like, there's so many things this meeting could be. I've decided I'm not going to get worked up about it until there's something solid to get worked up about. And maybe that'll leave me with egg on my face, but here we go. That's all I've got for today. Tomorrow we'll be back with another episode. I'm hoping to do some more draft talk tomorrow, talk about a couple more players the Blue Jackets could draft at 14th overall, but with the way things are moving, that's going to be kind of fluid. So we'll see what we're talking about tomorrow. Thank you for listening to this episode, making it your first listen of the day every single day. Welcome to Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. And we're also over on Twitter as well at LO_Blue Jackets. Like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, make sure you stay locked on.